what you were getting into.
You are the husband of a wife who has a mind and a life of her own.
This is your chance to make history.
I'm just terrified of my girls.
I couldn't bear to watch you destroy yourself.
I have done everything I was supposed to do!
The world is always going to judge us.
They can kick me out, but they can't make me somebody I'm not.
Good afternoon and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Karen Tumulty, Deputy Editorial Page Editor and a columnist here at the Washington Post. And it is my absolute delight today to be discussing an upcoming Showtime original series, The First Lady, with Suzanne Bier, the director of that series, and Gillian Anderson, who plays Eleanor Roosevelt in the series. And it looks at the very complicated lives and enduring influence of three very, very different first ladies. So, Suzanne, I think I'd like to ask you first, why did you pick these three first ladies, Eleanor Roosevelt, Betty Ford, and Michelle Obama, to focus on and weave their stories together? What do we learn about our first ladies through these women?
Well, first of all, they are three really extraordinary women, but we are also spanning 110 years, and starting with Eleanor Roosevelt and ending with Michelle Obama. And I think by bringing those three stories together, we are not just describing three amazing women, but we are describing the story of all women during that whole period. Not just all women, all human beings, at least in this part of the world. And for me, being involved in a project like that, which has such a scope, not just in terms of time and place, but in terms of human depth, and was just so utterly fascinating. And I do feel that I kind of understand all of us a little bit better after having done it, and I hope audience will as well.
So, Gillian, let's talk about Eleanor Roosevelt. She really was our first true social activist in her own right as a first lady. And I think every first lady has since then been measured to some degree against Eleanor Roosevelt. But as you portray her, she had a very complicated personal life, an unfaithful husband, an overbearing mother-in-law. She was, I think you could say, a fairly unenthusiastic about motherhood. So how do you take all of these things and weave them into this person who became truly the conscience of her husband's presidency? In fact, she was the legs that Franklin Roosevelt didn't have. She could get out around the country and see the problems in ways that he couldn't.
Well, I think, on the one hand, all of that is woven together for us between the, in the scripts and during the editing process, which I know had changed and undulated from beginning to end. And where we see Eleanor, we go back in time at one point and we see a little bit of her childhood. And so much of what took place in her childhood influenced who she became later on. And there was so much sadness and so much trauma growing up with a mother who put her down constantly and who told her that she was ugly and she wouldn't amount to anything, and then a mother and a father dying when she was 8 and 10, and growing up under the care of a grandmother who didn't really care for her, and she didn't have it easy, and yet what her childhood was about and how she grew out of that swamp of sadness made her so sensitive and compassionate to the underdog and to the underprivileged, and to, even though she was a Roosevelt, where her mind was and where she felt her duty was about, and where she felt the most joy was in being of service to every man, to every woman, to every human being who did not have the privileges that she had. And her entire life she gave over to being of service in that way. And so she was that young woman. She was that woman even before before Franklin was president, and she found a way to turn the role of First Lady into exactly what she needed it to be in order to be the woman that she wanted to be. And that woman was, she wrote 24 books, and she had a radio show every single day and a My Day column every day, and was so unbelievably active and in the civil rights movement, and did work for soldiers. And I mean, she was everywhere, and for everyone. And to even imagine that one could live up even in the tiniest little way to this extraordinary woman is just, it feels unfathomable, And yes, she had 5 children, but she had 5 children who, she did struggle with motherhood, and her first love was being of service. And so all of those aspects make for a very interesting, for an actor, for a very interesting and complex character. And I think that the writers go a long way towards, putting as many aspects and facets of who she was onto the page and onto the screen, so that we get to see, quite a full scope of a human being and of a woman at the time.
Can I just add to that Franklin also fell in love with that woman. I mean, he fell in love with that young woman who was someone who wanted to be of service. So it was, I mean, she very interestingly pretty much was who she was from a very young age. And part of their relationship, which is also which is shown in the show, is that that he truly admired her. And I mean, without hesitations, and their relationship was very complicated and not necessarily at all times entirely happy, but it was always very much a very, very deep mutual respect, and from his point of view, admiration. So it was very unusual and in a way, quite weirdly contemporary, very unlike in that respect, very unlike most, or very unlike how we perceive relationship for that particular period.
And she, of course, makes the point. I mean, she grows up beautiful mother, but not believing she is physically beautiful. But then she makes the point that the real thing of beauty is to be useful, and certainly devotes her life to that. This is such an interesting moment, though, to be looking at our first ladies, because I think that we really have seen a great reassessment of who they are. There have been a number of biographies out about first ladies, and heck, I even wrote one myself. And you see that Michelle Obama's own memoir became the biggest selling memoir of anyone in history. We've seen a first lady become a senator and run for president twice. Do you think the country has reached a point where they are looking at these women sort of in a different light and a different kind of appreciation maybe than they've had in the past?
Oh gosh, definitely. And I think that that definitely started with Eleanor, I mean, really, really creating what that role was and adding import and value to it. And, that it wasn't, her role wasn't just for the sake of serving other women and decorating the White House and all of the expectations that came with the role when they first got into the White House. She really crafted something, and having an all-female press corps and having regular meetings and with all female press corps, encouraging newspapers to hire women so that they could send a woman, because men weren't invited, in order to sit and be in her company and hear what she had to say. That she found ways to sway people and to talk about things that were political, and that she thought that maybe Franklin didn't necessarily have the ability at various times to press certain topics based on the impact that would happen were he to take up the cause. He would sometimes allow her to do what she felt she needed to do and say, and he'd be able to deny and say, well, that's my wife, she's got a mind of her own. And that's quite an extraordinary thing. But she really set the tone for that role to be, to have great meaning and value, and to be as as not as important, but to be an incredibly important platform to make change and to get things done and to serve the people.
And yet each of our first
I think
ladies
also,
has had to invent this role for herself. And you don't get a job description, you don't get a portfolio, and I think none of them have come into the role in a more accidental set of circumstances than Betty Ford, who's played in this series beautifully by Michelle Pfeiffer. And Suzanne, talk about her a little bit. Again, she sort of was married to a congressman from Michigan.
She never wanted to, she just really wanted to have a happy life in a way. She was not attracted by what that position could do to her. And I don't think she realized it would ever become a reality because Jerry Ford did not anticipate become president. And nor did the country anticipate Jerry Ford becoming president, and never mind Betty Ford becoming first lady. But once she was there, and once she realized what she could do with the position, she totally embraced it. Not personally, I don't think she ever personally enjoyed it. I don't think she ever personally really enjoyed the attention, but she greatly appreciated what it could do in terms of furthering the causes she believed in. And she was a very progressive, and I mean, she was supporting so many women's issues. And I mean, she was her whole take on breast cancer, I think, profoundly changed the world and profoundly changed the perception of how we talk about it. And so I think she stumble into a huge position of power and used it very, very smartly and brilliantly, and changed a whole lot of things. But I wanted to say something in connection to what you spoke about earlier, about whether the First Lady position have changed. What was interesting with this show was that obviously a lot of things have changed, and many things have changed for the better. But interestingly, there was a number of, Michelle Obama hit a number of walls that were almost identical to Eleanor Roosevelt. So on the one hand, the position have changed. On the other hand, there are very similar things. And I think it essentially reflects that our society is definitely different from what it used to be 110 years ago, but it's still not an even society. And which is also, I think, one of the reasons why Michelle Obama's book became so big, because I think there's such a need for addressing female power and female potential change, which is why this series is so incredibly relevant and important.
And she is played in the series by the wonderful Viola Davis. But she too comes into this political life reluctantly. There's a wonderful scene where the Secret Service descends on the house and her children are sort of traumatized. Talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about Michelle Obama, because of the three first ladies you focus on, she's the one who's still on the scene. She's the one who is, to this day, such an influence in our society. So could you talk a little bit about her own sort of growth and acceptance of the role that sort of fate had picked her to play?
You know, I mean, she's also the scary one because she's alive. And I think we all, I think Viola in particular have this kind of, whoa, what do they think? How are they going to feel when they watch it? I mean, do they feel, can they reckon? I mean, in my fantasy world, they watch it, and if they don't recognize concrete details, they feel aligned with how we perceive who they are and their development and what they became. But Michelle Obama, in a way, I mean, starts out being completely disinterested in politics, but she's always very conscious of moral issues, of kind of helping the greater good. And so I think in a way her hesitance to politics has more to do with almost like a skepticism about the effect of politics, whether it actually really can do what it sets out to do. Because there's no doubt about her wanting to change the world for the better. Everything she does is about that. And so it's been very interesting in talking with Viola about this part, about how to balance the hesitance to politics and the hesitance about the White House and the, more than anything, the public exposure and the danger to the family, because being the first Black president is definitely a very precautious position in terms of being threatened. I mean, the threat to them was palpable. And so balancing all of these things into showing life and showing a life in the White House, which became so impactful, was very much the challenge in telling that story.
So I think we have a clip here that we would like to show from this series.
Yes, thank you.
Eleanor, aren't you supposed to be with the retired First Lady?
We're on our way. Will you make sure that he reads this?
Yes, of course. What is it?
It's my suggestions for cabinet appointments.
Okay.
Female ones. Where are we with the speech?
Well, not as far as we would be were there not 40 other things to do.
What's more important than the speech, Louis? It's tomorrow.
I know. We'll get to it.
Well, let me see a draft of it. I can cancel the First Lady.
You can't cancel the First Lady.
I can. Told her she could. First Lady. It's important that he leads with the cold, hard truth. Add some hope to it, but he needs to state the facts plain and simple. There are 30 million Americans out of work, and they don't want to be pandered to.
Couldn't agree more.
Left to his own devices, Franklin always errs on the side of optimism, but we need to strike the balance.
Mrs. R., Earl and the car have been outside for over an hour.
Oh, goodness.
That's entirely unnecessary. I'm going to walk.
You're not walking.
Walk.
So, Gillian, one of the more intriguing parts of this is the exploration of Eleanor Roosevelt's relationships and the sort of emotional sustenance she got from other women. And specifically, there is the relationship with Lorena Hickok, the journalist. What are we left to make of that, since there's been a lot of speculation about that over the years?
There has been a lot of speculation. I mean, there was an entire book that was published of their letters back and forth, which were incredibly intimate and very much hinted at a physical intimacy as well. And we also know that apparently Hick had destroyed a number of the letters at some point, perhaps because she felt that they might be too incriminating for either of them. And so I think there are those who don't want it to be true, and there are those who do want it to be true. And from what I've understood and read, and certainly how we explore it in the series, Hick was an incredibly important, long-standing, romantic relationship in her life. She also had other relationships with women, other relationships with men. There's also an ambiguous relationship with her bodyguard, Earl Miller, who was a very strapping, tall, handsome man and they spent hours and hours and hours together riding horses and going swimming, and he taught her how to do things that she had previously been afraid of doing, physical things. And so she had some really devoted, long-standing friendships, and she was in that arena so much more complex and courageous than perhaps we'd expect her from either herself, from her physicality, from that particular time. But she was an incredibly modern woman in that sense.
And again, where does she grows up in the ultimate of privilege. You know, her uncle is president of the United States. Where does this empathy for the downtrodden come from?
Well, I think it comes from so much loss as a child, you know, having a beautiful mother and being told every day that she was ugly, being told that she had to work on her mind and her education because she was never going to, properly win the right kind of man with her looks. And so she had to work on her studies. And I think she felt that she really, there were so many things that she did that she felt that mortified her, that she felt like she had disappointed her mother, so many things. And, down to, she talks about at one point being scolded. Her mother was so embarrassed because in front of a teacher, Eleanor was not able to spell the word horse. And her mother took her failings, Eleanor's failings, very personally. And so I think she was very used to, she was lonely. She as I said, she lost her mother and then her beloved father when she was 10 years old. He died of alcoholism, aged I think 34. And she absolutely adored him, continued an interior life as if they were together, almost as a couple, living life together, going forward in her mind. She had a very strong interior life, and then ended up, moving in with her grandmother, who made her work with the servants and work in the kitchen, and also was never celebrating of her as a unique and thriving young person. And so when she eventually got out of that system and ended up going to school in the UK, and under the tutorage of a woman called Madame Soubestre, and discovered her voice and was taught how to debate and was taught that she could do anything, and they traveled Europe together, and she suddenly had freedom for the first time in her life, and I think that's the first time where she really discovered who she was and what she wanted to be. But at the heart of that, at the root of that, was an understanding of deep sorrow, deep difficulty, compassion for people who had it hard. And she started a school with a couple of women friends of hers when Franklin was a governor in Albany. She started a school back in the city, and she would travel on the train every day and go and teach, and the salary that she made, she gave away to charity. All of the salary that she ever made through her columns and the works that she did, she always gave away. Now that's an easy thing to say when you're being, financed by one of the wealthiest mother-in-laws in the country, but she didn't have to. That she felt that was her duty and her purpose, and she genuinely felt and did felt that she could, and she and Franklin could improve people's lives, and she spent every waking moment of her life trying to do so.
So she was also very frugal. I mean, she was very frugal, and I mean, she liked clothes, but she wasn't spending a lot of money on anything. And she was this, in a way, she became the conscious of the world, of the States, because she was so profoundly morally focused on helping the world, which is why Franklin let her hold the speech where after Pearl Harbor was bombed. She made the speech on the radio to the public, because there was something, she was uncompromising about always doing the right thing.
Well, Suzanne, though, until now, these have all been women in this role. Someday, there is going to be a man as the first spouse. So what do you think he has to learn from all of the women in whose footsteps he will be following?
He will have to learn to use the system the way that they all did. To use the system to actually achieve way more changes than all of us realize, and to kind of, unlike the presidents who are faced with the reality of power, the first wife can actually change things because they do them slightly from other angles and are never really confronted with, necessarily publicly showing what it's about. So whoever is going to be that guy is going to sort of copy what these very, very smart, very accomplished very uncompromising women have done. And I'm going to be looking forward to that.
They'll have to learn that it's not about him.
Right. Well, again, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. And I just so enjoyed every single one of these terrific performances in this series. So first of all, congratulations. I think people are really going to learn a lot by watching The First Lady.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so a reminder to our audience, The First Lady will start on Showtime on April the 17th. I'm Karen Tumulty, and I want to thank you for being with us today and to remind you that you can learn more about our upcoming programming by going to WashingtonPostLive.com. See you soon.